Welcome, one and all, to Theron Talks Comics Friday Pod, a short little chat about anything comic related that I can think of. Mostly this week's issues, upcoming issues, solicits when they're out, and assorted clever ways that I can plug my other material. On second thought, no, ignore that last part. I'm completely joking and not at all self promoting, except for all the times that I am. If you're finding this on your podcast services, please consider hopping over to Theron Reads Comics on Substack for additional reviews and articles. And no matter where you're listening to this, you can always find me on Twitter, Bluesky, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram as Theron Reads Comics or at Theron's Comics. The first issue worth talking about this week, I think, is Ultimate Spider-Man 2, which I personally am of the opinion outshone the first one. I was pretty complimentary about the first issue in a very stream of consciousness podcast last month. The second issue I gave a very glowing review to. Hickman is not always my cup of tea. In fact, mostly not my cup of tea. I'm heavily critical of him, largely because I think he prioritizes plot over character. And when it comes to Marvel, sometimes I feel he shoves square characters into round holes to make his stories work. That's not to say that he's not an excellent writer. When it comes to long-form storytelling in comic books, I think he's one of the best out there these days. Very good at constructing long stories. His Marvel work, he is really quite good at taking all the toys out of the toy box, playing around with them, and then putting them neatly away for whoever comes after. He typically does not leave a mess. But the first two issues of Ultimate Spider-Man are heavily character-oriented. The second issue has a very, very light plot in the traditional sense. So it's mostly Peter web-swinging about, trying to get comfortable with his new abilities. Obviously, May finds out that he is he's not called Spider-Man yet in the issue, but he's the character in black swinging around the city. It's interesting that you take these two issues, and the first issue is all about getting to know Peter, his life, his marriage, his job, his relationship with Uncle Ben, who's alive. And then the second issue is all about getting to know Spider-Man. And so you get the two introductions, and there's not much crossover between those two sides of him yet. Of course, there's going to be. So it's heavily character focused. I think this is a great way to start the series and move forward from there after you've gotten to know him. Hickman is possibly laying some hints down about future storylines, certainly the Green Goblin with Harry, and there's some machinations going on swirling around Wilson Fisk, but nothing obvious in a big picture sense. Something else that is annoying about Ultimate Spider-Man, and this has nothing to do with the comic, is the way it's often received online. Now, social media is, of course, a toxic cesspool, especially Twitter. And you see, I commented on my own timeline that on Wednesday, the algorithm, for whatever reason, was showing me nothing about Ultimate Spider-Man, but boy, was I seen complaining about the Spider-Boy, Superior Spider-Man, and Amazing Spider-Man because Bleeding Cool had the Marvel solicits a day earlier than everybody else. And these were complaints from people who liked Ultimate Spider-Man, and I always find myself thinking, okay, if you have the Spider-Man book that you want, finally, all the things that you've been asking for, why care about the other ones? All the books are going to do what they do. Amazing Spider-Man's doing its thing. Superior Spider-Man and Spider-Boy are doing their thing, obviously different writers involved in both of those, and Ultimate Spider-Man is doing its thing in an entirely different universe. Talk about things you like and not what you don't. I mean, especially if you have a vendetta against Amazing Spider-Man and Marvel editorial, why give it any oxygen? Just let it exist over to the side and, maybe it'll implode and you'll get lucky. The other thing that I've noticed is already developing people who are almost waiting. Some are anticipating, some are almost looking forward to when Hickman inevitably does some crazy Hickman thing, upends the table, takes away all the things that readers love about these first two issues, and then readers complain again because Spider-Man fans, and to a lesser extent, Batman fans have a rap of basically eventually hating every writer that tackles the character because they're very picky about what they like and what they don't like. This goes back to talking about things you like. Why are you ragging on fans who like something just because either you don't or your expectation is they're going to get upset eventually? Maybe they will. Who knows? Who cares? Um, just let people enjoy their thing. If they're not bugging you, I don't see why you have to go out and make a big deal out of it. So that's my social media is bad rant for today. The Guardians of the Galaxy annual wrapped up Kelly and Lansing's run. I didn't review that. I had reviewed several of the opening issues of the series. I kind of stopped reviewing it around the time that the Guardians flew into Groot space and got covered with tree bark and discovered that Groot was trying to rebirth everything. I mean, the series wasn't bad. I just didn't have anything else to say about it at that point. It kind of went out with a whimper. You had this big space battle, except not really, because that was resolved fairly quickly via some nice dialogue and the return of a whole lot of people who everybody thought was dead. Uh, my issue with the series was that the jeopardy seemed to be resolved too early. The Guardians flew into what they thought was going to be their death, and then we see them happily the next issue. For a moment, it seemed like there was mind control involved, but that was uh, dispensed with quickly as well. They just seemed super happy. I think the series, and again, this is I'm judging a series on what it isn't as opposed to what it was. I think it might have fared better as a story, or at least gone on stronger if the jeopardy had been maintained a little bit longer. If it could have been, if the characters, getting grooted, for lack of a better term, got pushed later in the series, and you maintain some of the jeopardy in the opening issues was, I think, some of the best of the series. The first issue where you catch up with Star-Lord on the planet that gets hit by the first Groot fall that we see, the issue where they catch up to Rocket. Rocket's been floating around one planet shooting each Groot fall before it can hit the planet, and of course we catch up with him when that fails and he's unable to save the planet from one of them. The best part of the entire series, I think, was the payoff with Drax's soul. They went on an adventure to catch that earlier in the series that at the time seemed superfluous and quickly forgotten. And it pays off entirely here when Drax sacrifices himself to save the day. He gets kind of a sappy conversation, but he, as a character, takes a step forward that I don't know that anybody else in the series does. He has, it's not an especially long arc, but he definitely, I think, has the best arc and the most satisfying. There's a nice moment at the end, a final conversation with Rocket and Groot, where Rocket is, summing it up with, "Hey, you had an issue. Why didn't you tell us? Even though you're kind of limited in what you can tell us. But, go to your friends for help," that sort of thing. But I think the Drax arc makes the last issue. I don't think it was a bad issue. I don't think it was a great issue. It was just kind of there. X-Force 49, I also didn't review. And not because the issue wasn't good. I just wanted to talk about it instead. It centers around Beast being reset back, I think, to when he was on the Avengers. At least that's the time frame they've said previously in the X books, in X Force. That seems like a really far way to send Beast back. I mean, that's a lot of years of continuity for him not to remember. And I don't know how you're going to deal with that. Do you somehow update him to, I don't know, the memories of what happened instead of having done it, so he has the awareness, but he didn't do it? Does that then invite a bad Beast from showing up again? Do you just say, hey, we're going to wipe out everything from the mid to late 80s-ish onward? Or I guess everything pre-X Factor. I don't know. The question this also leads to is this a blueprint for some kind of memory or identity reset for characters as a way to get out of Krakoa. I ask that, and this will lead into Rise of the Powers of X, because I think it's worth wondering how on earth Marvel is going to reset the mutants after the Krakoa era is gone. They've said that it's not going to be a wholesale retcon. Krakoa will still be in continuity. But, if you give 5 minutes thought to this is a group of people who, after years of oppression slash second class citizen, depending on the series at the time, got their own nation for their own people. They had their own technology. They had developed their own culture. Nightcrawler was developing his own religion. They colonized a planet. And all of this was taken from them in an attempted genocide by humans, and not just like one nation, but humans at large, pretty much. And let's say that the X-Men win and Orcs is destroyed. Well, that's great. Krakoa was still blown to pieces. Humans still almost wiped you out. And if you're not staying on Krakoa, which seems to be the case, how are you going to assimilate back into any other country without, terrorizing the hell out of the citizens and government? So, does adjusting memory somehow fix that as a way of retconning partially what happened without undoing events? I don't know. It's just a thought I had. And like I said, that brings us to Rise of the Powers of X number 2, which in my mind, this is the series that matters as compared to Fall of the House of X. This and maybe X-Men Forever when it comes up. We'll see. There is a lot of complexity in this series. This series seems more planned out to the extent that any of the Fall of X and post Fall of X has been planned out. That's been one of Gillen's strengths since he came aboard Immortal X-Men. He seems to have had more of a plan than some of the other writers. And the complexity here is kind of about the entire world of Krakoa. The Duggan series, Fall of the House of X, is just addressing for the moment the genocide angle. Of course, they keep calling these two series that are actually one, so presumably come May, when all of the X series get canceled, quote unquote, Fall of the House of X and Rise of the Powers of X are probably more or less converging in one final fight, whatever form that takes, to save mutants and move out of the Krakoa era in some fashion. I think Rise of the Powers of X, my guess is, well, like I said, it's the one that's going to matter. I think it's the one that's going to set up whatever the way out of this is. And so now we come to the Marvel May solicits. As I mentioned, all of the Krakoa X series are being canceled. A couple of ancillary X books, X-Men 97, Wolverine Madripoor Knights, new Ms. Marvel Mutant Menace. All three are X-Men 97? I don't have it in front of me. But Mutant Menace and Madripoor Knights, I think, are both continuing. But of course, Madripoor Knights isn't connected to current continuity. And Ms. Marvel, despite the big to-do when she became a mutant, has kind of been simultaneously involved in events and kind of off to the side. There is yet another $10 Amazing Spider-Man special issue, number 50. It looks to involve the Green Goblin again, because I'm shocked that there's gambling going on in this establishment. I had in my podcast about Amazing Spider-Man 26, the issue where Ms. Marvel died, I kind of went off on a mini tirade about these extended, I think it was that one and not the wedding issue 31. But in one of them, I went off on a mini tirade about the frequency with which Spider-Man comics get these absurdly overpriced extra size issues, and how most of them, the extra material, is either bad filler or commercials for upcoming series. That was, in fact, the last one. I think the oversized issue was A good, I want to say almost half the issue, certainly a third of it, was commercials for all the upcoming Spider series. Um, I don't, Marvel's going to keep doing this as long as people keep buying them. It's just incredibly frustrating the frequency with which they do them, and the quality of material that gets put in them just frequently feels like a cash grab. That there's not much concern for quality uh, delivery for what people are paying for. The other big thing in the solicits for Marvel for May was Blood Hunt kicks off, running through May, June, and July. 3 months, 54 issues, 59 if you also get the red band versions of the main miniseries. Games Radar priced at around $200 for the whole thing. In May, if you get every tie-in issue that's out, it's about 70, a little short of 70. And every miniseries, not ongoing series that has a tie-in issue, but every event-specific miniseries carries a $4.99 price tag. They do clock in at 40 pages as opposed to 32. Hopefully that's 40 pages of actual relevant material and not weird backup things. It's not the biggest event in the world. At 54 issues, it is kind of clocking in around the size of events that are line wide or last a bit longer than 3 months. Hopefully it is not one Marvel expects people to pick up all of. It's one where you can just pick and choose. I would be surprised if anybody going in expects this to have any lasting results, even the month after it ends. I'm reminded of Judgment Day. Is that 2 years ago now? Where the final issue of the main miniseries, Tony and Steve are already laughing about it, and there were no consequences of it afterward, which is crazy because a whole lot of people got killed before the Celestial brought them back to life. Six Fingers and the One Hand, the two series from Image that are connected. I don't know how else to put it. I didn't do a review on either one of those. Both of them were very good. The Six Fingers that was out this week, I thought was much more interesting. The character was very relatable. It wasn't as concerned as much with the world around the character that was going on. The previous issue had much more world building involved. This one was much more of a personal story. The character was surprisingly relatable up until he discovered that he was busy killing people and not remembering. But it was fun to read this guy who's obsessed with keeping things in order go through this flustered day of everything going badly, only for him to discover the truth about himself. I'm excited for both series. I hope they do very, very well. I'll probably review them traditionally more in upcoming months. Okay, that I think will do it for this week, which is the first time I'm doing one of these. I'll probably tweak the format here and there, but again, it's largely going to be kind of these sorts of thoughts. I want to thank all of you for spending a little bit of your time with me today. Let's all get together again next week, and until then, peace out.